All right, let's get it started here on the Panther-Lair podcast for this week. The live stream on YouTube. Glad you could tune in, give it a listen, check it out. Hope everybody's feeling good here on Tuesday night. I'm guessing you probably are in the aftermath of Pitt's first round win in the ACC tournament, 81-72 over Wake Forest. Obviously, that's a big focus for us here on the podcast this week, although we've got a lot of things I want to talk about. But I got to be honest, that game kind of changed my perspective on a few things. And kind of the, and I say this affectionately, kind of the goober media thing to say before Tuesday's game. And I said it myself, and I was probably going to talk about it. I think I talked about it on the Panthers Insider Show on Saturday, and it was inevitable. If you're going to talk about Pitt basketball heading into this ACC tournament, you were going to get into this conversation, and the kind of goober media question is, what could Pitt have done in the ACC tournament? What could they have done against Wake Forest to change your perspective on everything that happened in the 31 games that came before it? Was there anything they could have done to change your perspective on the 31 games that came before it? And I mean, the short answer is no. There's nothing they could have done. Those 31 games happened. Those 20 ACC games happened. The 7-game losing streak happened. And Nicholls State happened. And the first Wake Forest game happened. And the Louisville game in overtime. And the first Miami game. I mean, these things happen. You weren't going to be able to take those away. You weren't going to be able to change them or overturn them or have a different reaction to those games, because the issues you saw in those games, showed up time and time again, certainly in the 16 losses that Pitt had through the regular season, but also in some of the wins. A significant portion of some of the wins, you saw those issues come up, time and again. And so one game wasn't going to change it. Those concerns that you and I had about Pitt basketball, the things we were all worried about with this team, or the issues we saw with this team, didn't come from one game, and they certainly weren't going to be erased by one game. But if there was anything that Pitt could have done, short of making a run to the ACC tournament championship, if there was anything Pitt could have done to maybe change your perspective just a little bit, or at least give you a little bit of positivity, it was to play a damn near perfect game. And I'm not going to say they played a damn near perfect game against Wake Forest on Tuesday afternoon, but by golly, they got close. They played as well as they've played in a long time. I think you'd have to, you're obviously, the last win was 8 games ago, when they beat Georgia Tech in that first game. But for the last time, they really played a game at that level, a complete game start to finish that well. Canisius, when they scored 87 points, is that where you're going to look for a comparison point on this game? I don't know if there was an ACC game they played where they were this consistently good, start to finish, as they were in this game against Wake Forest on Tuesday. And, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't without its bumps along the way. It wasn't without its struggles, because they certainly, in the first half, when the Mucius kid couldn't miss. At some point you need to learn how to defend a 3-point shot, and that's been an issue all season. They haven't been great in that regard. And they let Wake Forest get out to an 8-point lead and 7-point lead. I think it might have even been 9 at one point. That obviously they had their issues there, and so it wasn't a perfect. It wasn't a perfect performance. But as I say, it was really close. And one of the things that really stood out, and you're not going to correct an issue in one game. If there's an issue that's been building over 31 games, you're not going to fix it in one game. But one thing that they did on Tuesday that they didn't do the rest of the season, and really you flip that around, one thing they didn't do on Tuesday that they did throughout the season was have that long scoreless drought, that 6-minute scoreless drought that just sinks them time and time again. The NC State game 2 games ago, when they showed a lot of promising signs and they played really well from the start, they had like a 6-minute drought early in the second half where it sunk their hopes. They couldn't come back from that. They couldn't overcome it and still beat NC State. And I think as I was watching the first half of this game, I kept waiting for that stretch to come. I kept waiting for that drought to show up. And then, and they avoided it in the first half. I don't think they had I think their longest scoreless drought in the first half was about 2.5 minutes, 2:34, and that was right around the time when when Wake Forest really didn't pull away in that stretch. I mean, Pitt managed to play some good defense in there and not get blown out in that 2.5 minute stretch, and then they overcame it and stayed in it. And you get into the second half, I don't think they had a scoreless drought that even got to 2 minutes in the second half. And you kept waiting for it to happen, or you kept wondering if it was going to happen. I remember thinking 5 minutes into the game, they just played really well. Can they keep this up? And can they avoid going into those droughts? And when they went into halftime down 41-40, I said, okay, they weathered a storm there. They were down by almost double digits. They were down there by 7, 8, 9 points. And then they go on like a 10-3 run to finish the first half and go into halftime trailing by 1. I said, okay, good rebound. You know what I mean? Good resiliency. In the second half, can you keep it up and avoid that scoreless drought? And they did. And look what happened. Shock of all shocks, they won the game. And as someone pointed out on Twitter, scored 80 points against an ACC opponent for the first time this season. Actually scored 80 points against an ACC opponent for the first time since the first round of the ACC tournament last year. So maybe this is just a postseason team. They get up for the ACC tournament games. I don't know what it is. But they came out and played better than they have in a long time this season. At least going back to January, maybe going back even further than that. And maybe it's on rest. Maybe there's something to be said for fresh legs, that they were able to, finally get a rest period that the ACC didn't give them during the course of the regular season, didn't give them an off week or even an extended break during the ACC schedule. They got their break at the end of the regular season. They played 20 games and then they got the break. They didn't play last weekend like most of the rest of the conference did. Maybe that helps. I'm inclined to think that the things they did were not, related to fatigue or energy, or a lack of fatigue or anything like that. I'm inclined to think that they went out, they shared the ball, and they hit some shots early. I mean, both teams started off really hot. I mean, Wake Forest and Pitt were both hitting baskets really, successfully early on. And for both teams, really, it kind of lasted. I think Wake Forest ended up shooting 45% for the game. Pitt shot 52% for the game. Wake Forest was 36% from 3. Pitt was 37.5% from 3. I mean, 6 of 16. It wasn't a big swing in the game, but they were able to, like I say, shoot really well. And I think you get some of those shots falling. You're able to penetrate and get into the lane like McGowan's and Johnson did, and hit a couple baskets. Tony and Champagnie both hit some 3-pointers early in the game. And I think it just set a tone, and they were able to keep that momentum up. Whereas we've seen them set tones in the past. We've seen them get off to, starting strong has not been this team's sort of standard operating procedure, but when they have started strong, it's wilted. Or when they've gotten into a hot stretch in the course of a game, they've faltered. And like I say, they've gone into those scoreless droughts, those scoring droughts, those scoreless stretches, and it didn't happen against Wake Forest. I was looking at the stats. Pitt scored field goals on 5 of their last 6 attempts in the game. They were able to close out the game. And, of course, the star of the game, Justin Champagnie. And before we talk about Justin, we should get here into the cold one for the show. This is, I think I had this before on the podcast. It's the New Belgium Voodoo Ranger. This one's the Starship IPA. If you haven't had this, you should. It's a good IPA. I like all the Voodoo Rangers. I mean, if you've listened to the podcast for a long time, you know that I've had the, what did I always have? The Guava Spruce Double IPA from the Voodoo Ranger. So, it's New Belgium is the brand. Voodoo Ranger is kind of, how would you describe it? There's like the make. The make is New Belgium. The model is Voodoo Ranger, and then the trim is the Starship IPA. So it's another variation. They do a lot of different Voodoo Rangers all year long, and this is a really this is a good one. This is as good as any that I've had. I've had a few. the Voodoo Rangers. So go out and find one of those. And we'll drink for Justin Champagnie. Because the young man played his tail off. And, inevitably the storyline was, did he take it personally that he didn't make the ACC All-Freshman team? And I think that's a great storyline. I think that's a great thing to go with. And he talked about it a little bit after the game, on the ACC network. They asked him, did you take it personally? Were you playing to try and show that you belonged on the ACC all-freshman team? And he said, yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I wanted to prove that I belonged and all of that. And I guess you can make a case for Champagnie. He's been really good. Jim Boeheim said he thought that Champagnie is the best freshman in the conference. He finished the regular season 7th among freshmen in points per game in the conference and 3rd in rebounds. So if you're 7th in scoring and 3rd in rebounds among all freshmen in the conference, then you are one of the best freshmen in the conference. Are you one of the best 5? You look at the 5 guys who made it. Vernon Carey from Duke was obvious. He made the All-ACC first team. I have my sheet here. This is why I'm looking down. I'm not glancing away from you or being shy around the camera. I'm just looking at the list. And Vernon Carey was an obvious choice to make it. Landers Noli, hard to argue with that. 15.6 points per game, 5.9 rebounds, 2.5 assists per game from Virginia Tech. He's really good. You can understand that. Patrick Williams is interesting. Florida State guy. Came off the bench. He was actually the 6th man of the year in the conference. And I think if you're going to make him the 6th man of the year, then and you want to put him on the all. If the 6th man of the year is a freshman, then he's probably one of the 5 best freshmen in the league. His numbers are not as good as Champagnie's. He averages fewer points and fewer rebounds, although he has 30 blocks. But I can understand it, I guess. Cole Anthony has drawn some complaints from people about why Cole Anthony is on the ACC All-Freshman team when he didn't play the whole season. He still played 20 games, kid out of North Carolina, and he averaged 20 points per game and 19.6 points per game and 5.7 rebounds per game. Now, I'll definitely concede that Cole Anthony got his votes for the All-Freshman team before the season even started. You know what I mean? As long as he played in some games, he was going to end up getting votes for the All-Freshman team. He got 2 votes for Freshman of the Year, which was obviously Vernon Carey from Duke. He was the best freshman in the conference, but Cole Anthony played 20 games. He had 18 double-figure scoring games. He had 9 20-point games out of 20. He was pretty great, and 20 games is a lot. It's not like he only played 10 games. He played 2/3 of the games this season. I can't argue with that. Cassius Stanley from Duke, though, 12.6 points per game, so he's 0.4 points per game better than Justin Champagnie. 4.9 rebounds per game. He's a little less than Justin Champagnie. And 1 assist per game. That one, I think is probably where you would really, either him or Patrick Williams. But again, if you're going to vote Williams from Florida State the 6th man of the year, he's probably going to have to make the all-freshman team. I think you could have an argument for Champagnie there. But listen, here's the thing about this all-freshman team and any of these all-ACC teams. And I think this is probably an important, this is a digression, but I think it's an important digression, an important intentional grounding here. I think it's an important digression because people will say, see, Pitt gets no respect from the ACC. The ACC just screws Pitt over, and they, you extend this to officiating, you extend this to scheduling decisions, you extend this to the fact that Pitt didn't have a bye and all this stuff. These all ACC teams are voted on by the 15 coaches and then 60 media members. The conference itself, the leadership of the conference doesn't make these decisions. It's voted on by the coaches and the ACC. Now, I think the lowest vote getter, I forget if it was, I think it might have been Cassius Stanley on the all-ACC, or the ACC, all-freshman team. I think he had 29 votes. So Champagnie came in somewhere with fewer than 29 votes, which we're talking about 75 voters. Champagnie not listed on, 47 of those ballots at least. the disrespect doesn't necessarily come from the league itself. I would bet you that Champagnie got a decent number of votes from coaches because he had some really good games in the ACC. He played really well in conference games. And I think coaches from other teams are going to have a lot of respect for Champagnie, and they're not looking forward to seeing him next year because he's a dangerous player. He's a really good player, and he showed that on Tuesday against Wake Forest. The problem, and this is the biggest problem with this conference, is the media. I mean, the media is the ones who are voting on this, right? The press, the reporters. And there's such a... Like, when we talk about the focus on the Triangle and the Carolinas and the ACC and Greensboro and all this, I mean, that's what it really comes back to. The media is so hung up on who the ACC is and what the ACC is, and they don't give a damn about Pitt and the fact that Pitt is in this conference. Pitt is like Syracuse, probably like Boston College, to be honest. It's amusing that they're in the conference. And they give like Miami respect because they think Miami's going to be good every year. And then Miami lets them down, and then they make fun of Miami. You know, they respect Virginia Tech because I guess the in Commonwealth rivalry with Virginia. But a team like Pitt, a school like Pitt, I should say, because it's not even a team. All right, because it's not just football, it's not just basketball, it's all of it. A school like Pitt and a school like Syracuse, they're never going to get respect from this conference. They have to go out and take it. If they've got one of the 5 best freshmen in the league, but the team only goes 15-16, too bad. You're not going to get respect for that. You go back and look at the year they won the Coastal Division in football. They had no first-team All-ACC players. Now, I mean, maybe you want to say, well, they didn't deserve to have any first-team All-ACC players. They won the division. They went 6-2 in the conference with 2,000-yard rushers, and they don't have a single guy on the first-team All-ACC, and they had a pretty good defense. The defense had really found itself over the second half of the season with some pretty good players on it, and they don't have a first-team All-ACC player. I forget if they even had a second team. I know Quadri Olson was on there. He might have been second team. And then they had a handful of guys like maybe 1 or 2 others on the second team, and then a handful on the third team. The problem is not that the conference doesn't care about Pitt or Syracuse. It's that the reporters, the media, just really can't see past. In football, they can't see past Clemson and Florida State and the Triangle. And in basketball, they can't see past, the Triangle. They can't. I mean, and that's the center of the friggin' universe, man. And if you're not in it, and especially if you're late to the party and you're hundreds of miles away, you're an 8-hour drive away from the Triangle. You're not in. I can't say the inner circle. You're not in the inner triangle. And that's how something like this happens. That's how Justin Champagnie, gets left off in all ACC team when you could probably make a very good case for him being on that list. And so I say, good for Justin Champagnie for going out and sticking it right up their triangle. Good for him. He goes out and scores 31. He hangs 31 on Wake Forest. A team from the holy state of North Carolina. Good for him. And let's say, tomorrow he's got an opportunity to go out and get the triangle, give it right to NC State. A couple of North Carolina teams back to back for Justin Champagnie for Pitt, an opportunity here. So good for him. And Champagnie was outstanding. You look at the final stat line, 31 points, career high. He goes 13 of 19 from the floor. I'm just as impressed by I can't. It's corny to say, I'm just as impressed by his shooting line as I am by his points. The points came from the shooting line. He scored 31 points because he was 13 of 19 from the floor. He was 3 of 7 from 3-point line. So what's that? 10 of 12 inside the arc. That's a good game, and especially when I think the Georgia Tech game, he was 3 of 14 or something like that. You need Champagnie playing that well because he is, and he's become, and I resisted saying it for a long time. But I'm fully on board. He's their best offensive weapon. There's no question about that. And he's been really good. He's been getting better and better and better throughout the season, and he was dominant. He was dominant, and there have been games this season where we've seen that the opponent doesn't have an answer for Justin Champagnie. In the second half of Syracuse, they really couldn't stop him. North Carolina game, they really got the one down there, I think. Is that the one he played really well? I had the notes open here. I was taking a look at Champagnie's. I forget if he played really well in that North Carolina game down there. Let's see. Just bring it up here because it's these game notes. They lay everything out for you. At North Carolina, yeah, he played 40 minutes and had 22 points. That's pretty strong work from Justin Champagnie there. Now, he wasn't 3 of 14 against Georgia Tech. I apologize. He was 2 of 8. He was 3 of 10 against NC State. And so, he had been, struggling a little bit. But he certainly wasn't on Tuesday. And you look, and he wasn't the only one. He's going to get all the attention, and he should, because he played great. And I think Abdul Kareem Coulibaly's getting some love after the game as well. I'm trying to think. Yeah, Roman was on in the comments. How about Abdul Kareem Coulibaly? What a revelation. Wish we could have seen more of him this year. We'll talk about him in a second, Roman. We'll get to your other comments there on the YouTube live stream. I appreciate everybody who's tuning in and giving some feedback, some interaction as we talk about this win over Wake Forest and kind of what it means. But, I mean, you look throughout the starting lineup, and you got some really strong and efficient performances. Xavier Johnson, 10 points on 4 of 8 from the floor. Trey McGowan's goes 14 points, 6 of 13. Johnson also had 8 assists to go with his 10 points. I mean, is that not the stat line you would love to see from Xavier Johnson on a every night basis? 4 of 8 from the floor, 10 points, 8 assists, 5 rebounds too. How about that? Let's just throw in 5 rebounds. Now he had 3 turnovers, but if you're going to get 8 assists, 5 rebounds, and 10 points in 35 minutes, I think you take that every day. That's a great game for Xavier Johnson. Trey McGowan's 6 of 13 from the floor, so he's a little under 500, but he goes 14 points. He gets 4 assists himself and only turns it over twice, playing 34 minutes. Audice Toney goes 4 of 10 from the floor. He hits 2 3-pointers. He's got 10 points. He grabs 4 rebounds. He's got 4 assists. Sharing the ball, not being selfish, making good decisions, making good passes. It was almost all the things we needed to see from this team, we wanted to see from this team, all season long. This still, 38% from 3, 37.5% from 3. That's okay. It's not great. You're not going to say you're a great shooting team, but that's okay. And they didn't, I don't think they didn't force it too much. I mean, Wake Forest got them into some bad shots with the zone defense, but overall, they ended up with 17 assists on 34 field goals. You'd like to do better than, getting an assist on half of your field goals. But I think, especially when they were getting, they ended up with 19 points off of turnovers. They had 10 fast break points. 42 points in the paint. They weren't necessarily, they were getting a lot of those opportunities to just get out and score. And somebody mentioned in the YouTube comments about playing up tempo. And Jason Martell said, I like the tempo today. They used their athleticism, and I agree. I think they were moving because they got into a rhythm. They were playing well, and the shots were falling, and they were able to keep it up. And like I said, that helped them avoid that scoring drought that we've seen so many times, and they just played really well. They played one of their best games. Abdul Kareem Coulibaly, this guy, 10 points, 7 rebounds in 15 minutes of play. No turnovers, 1 foul, 4 of 6 from the floor. And he actually, in the second half, he played 11 minutes in the second half, 8 points and 7 rebounds, 4 offensive boards. And those are just his second half numbers. Oh, and he had a block too. Meanwhile, Terrell Brown goes and plays 3 minutes. No shots, no rebounds, 1 foul. A little bit of a shift there. You know what I mean? You can see, Eric Hamilton gets the start. He plays 22 minutes, and I thought had a solid He was okay. 4 points and 2 rebounds in 22 minutes. But Abdul Kareem Coulibaly comes off the bench, throws in 15 minutes, gets 10 and 7 with 4 offensive rebounds. Yeah. You got to like that production. And it'll be, and someone else in the YouTube comments mentioned it. Chris Nguyen said, I apologize if I mispronounce your name, but we'll be curious to see how the minutes are distributed in this game on Wednesday when they play NC State, the second round of the ACC tournament. Coulibaly played 15 minutes. Terrell Brown only got 3 minutes. It'll be interesting to see how those minutes come out. I think there's a very good chance you'll see Hamilton and Coulibaly primarily, kind of like you did in this game against Wake Forest, because it's what was working. And Jeff Capel has always said he coaches by feel. He goes with the guys that are producing and seem like they give the team the best chance to win. And right now that's Coulibaly and that's Hamilton. So they went out and found a way to do the things that actually would create a little bit of a different vibe around the team and maybe the perception of the team and the perception of the roster. And, I didn't know if it was possible. I didn't expect it to happen. Quite frankly, I expected them to come out and lay an egg. I went back and forth so much with this team, from that comeback against Virginia. I said, okay, maybe they got a little something, and then they lay an egg against Syracuse, and then they play a pretty good game except for, maybe one 5 or 6 minute stretch against NC State, and then they just have a dog against Georgia Tech in the finale. It's, and now they play one of their best games of the season. And you don't know who's going to show up. You don't know what they're going to look like. But you at least know, I guess if you want to take something away from this game other than, Justin Champagnie looks great. And they really are developing some other pieces on this team. And, while Johnson and McGowan's played one of their played the kind of games you would like those guys to play. I think if you want to take something away from this game, it's maybe one of the things that has been the most frustrating about this team all season. And it's that talent really hasn't been the issue. Now, I mean, they've got holes talent-wise. I don't think there's any question about that. Their shooting is an issue. It's been an issue. They're not a great shooting team, and the numbers bear that out. The performance bears that out. The eyeball test bears that out. But talent hasn't been the issue. They've been good enough to, beat Florida State, take Louisville to overtime, hang with Duke for the better part of a game, beat Carolina despite the fact that Carolina's roster was depleted. I mean, they've been good enough to put themselves in situations to, beat teams like Wake Forest or NC State, even if they haven't been able to pull it off. Talent hasn't really. They have enough talent to compete in most games in the ACC. Maybe not win 14, maybe not win 13, but they're good enough talent-wise, good enough to win 10, good enough to win 11. And that's been maybe the most frustrating thing about this team this season is that talent hasn't been lacking. It's been the effort. It's been the commitment to the team and playing for the team and trying to win for the team. And for whatever reason, they seem to have that on Tuesday. Now, maybe it's easier to look like that and have that energy and have the good body language and have the good effort and the good, you're committed to the team and all that stuff. Maybe it's easier to do that when the shots are falling. I'm sure it is. But, the fact is they had it. And they had it more than they've had it in a long time. And it's hard not to look back and say, boy, if you could have just done that against Wake Forest the first time, if you could have just played like that against Louisville, if you could have played like that, against Miami in the first game, if you could have played like that against Clemson or NC State, it wouldn't have gone the way it did. The season wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have played out the same way it did. But I mean, whatever. It's in the past. I mean, we're still, I think, left with a lot of the questions, a lot of the personnel questions about who this team is and who some of these guys are and what their priorities are and kind of what the future might hold for them. Somebody asked, Luca Carroll asked about, anything new on McGowan's possibly wanting to transfer. I mean, look, I think we've seen rumors about a number of guys right now. We've seen rumors about 3, 4 players, maybe 5 players who could potentially transfer. And, I don't know what rumors are legit. I don't know what rumors have, something backing them up or not. It's all rumors right now. And, season's about to end. We'll wait a few weeks, and we probably should have a little bit more clarity about where this roster is and who's actually going to be coming back to this roster next season. But for now, like I say, it's all rumors, and it's hard to tell. It's hard to know. Like I say, everybody looks happy. Everybody seems to be enjoying themselves when the team wins, when they play well like they did on Tuesday. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes against NC State. And, this is going to be one of those podcasts that comes out in between games. And, if they put in a dog performance against NC State on Wednesday and you listen to this podcast on Thursday and I'm talking all this praise of the team, you're going to be like, what is wrong with this guy? They look terrible against NC State. So, maybe they'll win a few more games and then this positive talk can sustain for a little bit. But you definitely know you got a piece to build around with Justin Champagnie. You feel good about Au'Diese Toney coming back as a junior. Johnson and McGowan's, what do you say? I mean, what's your perspective right now on those two guys? It's tough. I mean, it's particularly tough because, there's 31 games of evidence of those guys really not doing the things that you hoped that they would do this season. But then you've also got this game on Tuesday against Wake Forest where they were both pretty good, where they both did the things you hoped they would do. You know what I mean? The Johnson was efficient and distributed the ball and made good decisions. And McGowan's was high-flying and really kind of, he made some exciting plays, but he wasn't out of control, and he made some good shots. I mean, I think it's tough to put your finger on where those guys are right now. And I don't know really what to think of it. And I was trying to think about this. I was thinking about this earlier on Tuesday, and this was before the game, before those guys both played really well. But I was thinking about how we were all hyping them up in the offseason. I mean, talking about Xavier Johnson being a two-and-done guy, that he wasn't expected to be back as a junior because he was going to go to the NBA. Now, he may or may not be back as a junior. Maybe he'll decide to transfer or something. Who knows? Again, rumors and all that stuff. But, we hyped those guys up so much based on their freshman seasons, and here we got to the end of the sophomore year, and boy, the perspective couldn't be any more different. And again, we're going to be shaded a little bit by what we saw in this game on Tuesday against Wake Forest, but I guess not what, but can you think of another situation where guys have gone from having the hype and the perspective be up here, at a certain height, and then, boy, in the course of a year, it just drops. You know what I mean? Like, I can't think of another time where guys had that much hype and optimism and positive feelings around them. You know what I mean? And, excitement around them. There was a lot of enthusiasm coming into the season. A lot of it was centered on those two guys. And you get to the end of the season, and the perspective just seems completely opposite. And I can't really remember another time. And we've seen times where guys have, where there's negativity, where, a guy comes out of his freshman year or sophomore year, and people say, I just don't think this guy's ever going to be able to play. He's never going to be able to contribute. We have countless examples of that. You can basketball or football. You can talk about a guy like Brad Wanamaker. He's sort of the classic guy. Everybody thought Brad Wanamaker was useless after his sophomore year. And he comes out and he becomes a really good player. The kind of guy that by the time he's a senior, you say, oh, geez, how are they going to, what are they going to do to replace Brad Wanamaker? And Lamar Patterson to a certain extent as well. Football-wise, everybody was ready to give up on Quadri Olson, Darren Hall, and then they go out in 2018 and they have, 1,000-yard seasons. There are lots of guys, and they're running behind Connor Dentino and Mike Herndon, who everybody was ready to, every year when we're talking about opening up scholarship space, we're talking about, Herndon and Dentino, those guys can move on. And they come out and they have a lot to do with Olson and Hall running for 1,000 yards that season. And so we can think a lot of examples of guys who you probably wrote off and then they, rebounded and ended up having really good careers. But what about guys who went the other way? I can't really think of other Pitt players who maybe burst onto the scene as freshmen and then fell off, particularly in public perception, the way, and public opinion, the way that these two guys have. If you're in the YouTube comments now, or if you're listening to this podcast later, you can tweet me. But can you think of another example of someone who, the perspective just flipped? And I've said this before, that it's not necessarily like Johnson and McGowan's got worse. They didn't necessarily get, I don't think they regressed. They just didn't improve like we thought they would. And because they didn't improve, and they continued to do the same things that they've been doing all of their freshman year, it held the team back. The team wasn't able to really kind of excel and take a step forward the way it should have if those guys had improved the way I think a lot of us expected them to, and the way everybody, the way Pitt needed them to, quite frankly. So I can't really think of any examples of that. And I actually went down and looked at, you think about basketball freshmen, and I can't really think of anybody, maybe, is it even fair to talk about like a guy like Shamil Stevenson? Shamil Stevenson, I thought, as a freshman, I thought he was going to be really good. I thought he was going to be an important piece of what Pitt was building going forward. But then you have the coaching change, and Stevenson ends up kind of getting lost in the shuffle. Never really seemed to fit in with Jeff Capel and what Jeff Capel was trying to do. And you saw various examples of that, of times when he just wouldn't play or he didn't get a lot of minutes, and it was, the writing was on the wall, and when he ultimately left, but so that situation was a little different with the coaching change. Football wise, I went back and looked at freshmen who have played, and I can't really see anybody who came out and jumped out as a freshman and he said, boy, this guy is going to be awesome. He's going to be a big piece of things moving forward. And then nothing. Let's see. Scott Lynch brought up Chris Taft. That's interesting. That's an interesting one, Scott. Let me without shaking the computer too much. I actually like that. That's a good good suggestion. Bringing up Chris Taft's college stats here. Look season by season. I do remember there was a ton of hype for him after his freshman season. He averaged 10.9 points per game and 7.5 rebounds. But then the next year his scoring went up. He averaged 13.3 points per game, playing roughly the same minutes, and he averaged the same rebounds. Numbers-wise, he pretty much produced the same. But, yeah, I do remember that feeling of him being kind of a disappointment. That he showed so much promise as a freshman, but then didn't seem to deliver on it. But is that more about what he did as a sophomore, or is that more about the fact that he left after his sophomore season? It might be the latter more than the former. Chris Wynn says Russell Shell. Now, you see, Shell had like one good game as a freshman. Shell was more a matter of a guy being a hyped recruit who didn't live up to it. Who fell short of the expectation. He was disappointment by comparison to his recruiting rankings, and that's something different. The list, I could fill up this legal pad, with guys who were hyped as recruits and then didn't deliver on that promise. There's no question about that. This legal pad, by the way, if you're trying to read it, it's just all the freshmen who have played for Pitt football since 2008. See that list? Yes, this is the kind of research that I did. I wanted to make a list to really look down and see if I could find a freshman who played and really did well as a freshman and then just failed to ever kind of live up to it. So, and I'm talking about guys who had seasons that would be comparable to Xavier Johnson and Trey McGowan's as freshmen. So, you could take 2014, Chris James played as a freshman, okay? Or Rory Blair. And I think, both of those guys had okay Rory Blair, he led the team in sacks. I think he had 5.5 sacks or something. He led the team in sacks. So he obviously disappointed, but I don't think nobody was as hyped about Rory Blair entering the 2015 season as they were about Xavier Johnson and Trey McGowan's entering this season. Chris James didn't do a lot as a freshman, and he obviously never lived up to it, and then he transferred. But that was more, I think, about recruiting hype than it was about what he actually did as a freshman. Malik Carter had one great game as a freshman and never delivered on that. But I don't think you ever went through an offseason thinking he's going to be, an amazing piece of this offense. I thought Malik Carter would have a chance to be the starting tailback. I thought he potentially could do it. He showed that he couldn't really handle that role, but I think there was still a role for him. He made some big plays. He won the Duke game. He scored the game-winning touchdown against Duke. And I think, there was a potential to do something with him there, but it obviously never worked out, and he's transferring now. But he didn't do that much. He didn't do enough as a freshman, I think, to create this kind of hype. Looking down the list of other freshmen, the guys who had the best seasons as freshmen, and it's really interesting because, I started looking at football. Like I say, this is my football list, and no, Roman Marcel Pastano is not on this list. This list only goes to 2008. Pastano played before that, or he was a freshman before that. I don't think he was on the 2008 team. And Greg Cross doesn't count because he was a JUCO, and he also, had like one play he actually did anything with. And Roman says Pat Bostic, but Pat Bostic, again, was a matter of a hyped recruit. I don't think anybody came out of 2007 saying, man, we are set at quarterback with Pat Bostic. And I love Pat, and that's not an insult to him. People came out of 2007 saying, okay, you got McCoy coming back, you got a great defense coming back, and you're going to have Bill Stahl, so all the quarterback issues will be resolved. That was a matter of Pat was a really hyped recruit who never lived up to that, and that's something different. That's not the same thing. McGowan's and Johnson created hype and excitement and enthusiasm because of what they did on the court, because of their production and performance as freshmen. And that's what I'm trying to find is another guy who really kind of compares to those two and the expectations and pressure that were put on them because of their performance, and then just to have it completely flip, by the end of their sophomore years. And looking back over football, obviously McCoy as a freshman in 2007 was, outstanding. That's a freshman season that really got you hyped up and created a lot of excitement and, anticipation. But a lot of freshmen have played since then. From 2008 through 2019 was at 12 seasons. There have been a lot of freshmen who have played. Not really too many that you would say were outstanding contributors. Not too many that you would say really lit the world on fire. I kind of went down and tried to find the best of the freshman football players who have played since 2008. You obviously have Dion Lewis in 2009. No question about that. Jonathan Baldwin in 2008, pretty good. Not Lewis in 2009, but pretty good. And compared to the rest of this list, it was one of the standout seasons. You have Jordan Whitehead in 2015. But outside of those three guys, there's really not much in the way of big-time production from freshmen. Kenny Pickett beat Miami in 2017. And so that's good. But that's not really, that's not a full season performance. That's one game where he was excellent. But most of these guys who played and James Conner will be another one that I would give credit. I would say he had a pretty good freshman season. He ended up at 799 yards or something. He was hurt. He got, he missed a lot of time, had limited carries in a lot of games because he got hurt, particularly through the midpoint of the season. But he had a great game against Duke early in the year. He was great in the Bowling Green, Pizza Bowl. He was pretty strong. But that's really it when you look over the last 12 seasons of really outstanding freshman seasons. Jordan Whitehead, James Conner, Dion Lewis, Jonathan Baldwin. Aaron Donald played as a freshman, but he had 3 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. Not exactly lighting the world on fire. J.P. Holtz was pretty good as a freshman in 2012. I think he started every game, or he played in every game and started whenever they used a tight end, or when to open the game. You could even go to this year and talk about Vincent Davis, and honestly, that probably ranks among the top 5 or 6 freshman season performances of the last 12 years at Pitt. And he was, I think most people would say he was just okay. I mean, he was hurt for a while. He wasn't an every down running back. He had limited opportunities. Oh yeah, Tyler Boyd. Yeah, definitely would have to circle that one. Good call by Chris Wynn. Yeah, Tyler Boyd is definitely one of the best freshman seasons. You would have to definitely circle that. I'll put a little star. I've got him on my list, but I forgot to put the little star by his name. Yeah, we'll get the stars out there. So, I mean, Lewis, Baldwin, Boyd, Connor, Whitehead, those are probably your 5 best freshman season performances. Roman says, Chris James, you can make an argument. He had 87 carries, 5 yards a carry. Yeah, I don't entirely disagree. Like I said, I think there was a lot of hype for Chris James when he came in. But he also, kind of went under the radar because James Conner was, killing it that year. Had like 1,700 yards rushing. That was when James Conner was a beast. And probably, James got, Chris James had 87 carries. But, when you talk about the running game in 2014, it gets overshadowed a little bit because James Conner was pretty outstanding. So there's really not a lot, and it's kind of interesting to see, because I do think that, Pat Narduzzi and Paul Chryst have been willing to play freshmen. They just haven't gotten that great of contributions out of them. And that, of course, brings us into this year when you're talking about some of the freshmen who are coming in now. And this kind of all dovetails in with one of the bigger stories, I guess, one of the things that have been written about the most. On Friday, Pitt had their first full pads practice of spring camp. They're off this week, by the way, for spring break. If you want to know the training camp the spring camp schedule, so last week they started camp. They had practice on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They're off this week for spring break, and then after that, it's every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday through the spring game. So if you want to know what Pitt's spring camp schedule is, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday through the spring game on April 11th at Heinz Field. But on Friday was their first practice in full pads. The NCAA says you can't practice in full pads. Your first 2 practices have to just be in, T-shirts, jerseys, and shorts and helmets. And so they put on full pads for the first time on Friday, and they ran some 11-on-11 team drills. The media got to actually see it. And the highlight of that, the biggest play of that was Israel Abanikanda, Izzy, the freshman running back, busting out like a 70-yard touchdown run when he zipped past some tackles and just took off. And nobody could catch him. And I think that got people real excited about what the freshman running back might be able to do this season. And we've talked a lot about freshmen who could play for Pitt in 2020. We've talked a lot about Jordan Addison. That's been the guy I've brought up a lot of times. I think he can get into the top 4, top 5 rotation at wide receiver. And nothing I've heard after the first week of spring camp has, run counter to that. I think that's still the expectation among Pitt people. But Izzy Abanikanda is another one because, he's coming into a running back room that's got A.J. Davis and Vincent Davis and Todd Sibley. You got Daniel Carter as a fullback and all this stuff. But there's not, you wouldn't say any of those guys, Davis or Sibley, has a lockdown, stone cold hold on the starting running back job. You wouldn't say that any of them has really just locked it up. It's just written in pen. All those guys shared carries last season. I don't even know if you would say that there was a number 1 running back last season. That was probably part of the problem. When we talk about the issues with the running game, I think part of the problem was that they didn't have a number 1 running back. That was not the only issue with the running game, but I think it was a big one. And so Abanikanda walks into a situation where the running back room is kind of crowded. There's a lot of guys in that running back room, but nobody that really is the alpha. And he's got a chance to he's got as good a chance to do it as any of them. And he's here early, so he's here in spring camp, so he can get extra time learning the playbook, and getting himself prepared, and being ready to contribute in the offense. And he's already turning heads and opening eyes with his speed. He's shown it in practice thus far, and I don't think there's any reason he can't get out there and get a lot of carries this season. I mean, Vincent Davis got a lot of carries last year, and that wasn't even just reliant on Todd Sibley getting hurt. I think that increased his carries, but that was second half of the season when that happened with Sibley anyway. And I think when you saw in the bowl game, A.J. Davis had one rushing attempt, and that rushing attempt came on a wildcat play where he didn't follow the blocks, and he ended up taking a tackle for loss. Vincent Davis was the better running back that day, so I think you look at it and you would expect Vincent Davis to, if there's a number one, he very well may be it entering spring camp this year. Well, that's the situation Izzy Abanikanda walks into. And Izzy is not the biggest running back in the world, but he's bigger than Vincent Davis. I think you're going to see a committee situation again. You're going to see guys splitting carries, but I don't see any reason the freshman can't be the man. And it's telling that when we talk about the best freshman performances over the last 12, 13 seasons, some of the guys who immediately come to mind are Dion Lewis, James Conner, LaShawn McCoy. Now, all three of those guys are NFL running backs. So part of that is just talent. It's ability. They were good enough to get it done. But I don't think it's a total surprise that freshmen excelled at running back. I think that is one of the positions where you can get on the field and have some success. There's some things you have to pick up. You have to be able to block. You have to be able to pick up a block. You have to be able to pick up a pass rush on, particularly if you're going to play on third down. And that's something that Abanikanda is going to have to master if he really wants to get significant playing time. Like he's showing that he can do all the running. He's got to show that he can do those other things too, so he can be on the field for 3 downs and not just 1 or 2, and then have to come off the field. But running back is a position where freshmen can play. Running back is a position where freshmen can excel. Let me see. Few comments have come in here as we've been discussing this. Roman asks, is there any chance Daniel Carter gets touches this year? I find it hard to believe he came here to block. Yeah, Daniel Carter didn't come to Pitt to be a fullback. He came to Pitt to be a tailback. But when he finally got on the field last season, it was as a fullback. And from what I've been able to see in practice this spring, he's playing fullback again. Now, does that necessarily mean he's just going to block? I don't think so. We haven't really seen what the fullback does in Mark Whipple's offense. We haven't really seen what the role of the fullback is because they haven't really had a fullback. The fullback they had last year at the beginning of the season was Rashad Wheeler, a converted defensive lineman who turned into an offensive lineman who turned into a fullback. They weren't doing a lot with the ball in his hands. And Daniel Carter, apparently moved to fullback at some point during the season, so he was still kind of learning things, and he only played in 3 games or something, or 4 games, so he preserved his red shirt. I think you give him a full year of learning the offense. There's opportunities to get the ball in his hands as a fullback. Like I said, we haven't seen what that role actually is. We haven't seen them use a fullback because they haven't had one. Now, with Carter, I think there's potential to move him around in different places on the field and get the ball to him, throwing it to him, handing it off, whatever it means, or whatever it may be. Royce Beacom asks, can Malik Carter come back if he can't transfer anywhere? Technically, yes. As somebody else mentioned in the comments, let me think. Roman said Pat Narduzzi made it sound like they could return, but only as a walk-on. Yeah, that was Pat Narduzzi's very specific comment. He said, "You go in the portal. If you want to come back, you're not going on scholarship." And to me, I think that's a very general statement, a very definitive statement. When you probably, you really going to stick to your guns on that? I don't know, and maybe you will. They haven't had a situation where they've had to decide on that. Or maybe they have. Maybe a guy like Darian Street or Tyler Sear or somebody wanted to come back, and they said, well, you can come back, but you have to be a walk-on. So maybe he has stuck to his guns on that. But either way, that's Pat Narduzzi's public stance. So, who knows? Who knows if, he would actually take Malik Carter back as a scholarship player. I think that ship has sailed. I think he's in the portal, so he's as good as gone, quite frankly. I think you probably let him go at that point. And it's a shame because I think Carter could have contributed. I think there were things he could have done. I think he could have helped them out a little bit more last season than he did. And I think they could have found different ways to get him the ball in his hands. Nobody seemed to know what to do with Malik Carter, or how they just weren't really sure of what the best way was to use him. And so he just kind of floundered, I think. And when they found ways to get the ball to him, I think he was able to make plays, but they just, I don't think you were going to run power handoffs with him. I think you had to do different kinds of things, tosses and throw the ball to him and sweeps. And, part of it was that their offense never really got into a rhythm, right? I mean, their offense never really consistently sustained drives. And I think if you're not going to consistently sustain drives, I don't think you have time to develop some of the things you would need to develop to get a guy like Carter going. I think he's a playmaker. I think he can really make a lot of things happen. But it didn't come to pass. I also think there was a pretty good chance that if Malik Carter had stayed at Pitt, he might have ended up back on defense. Potentially at cornerback where they do need some depth help. And so who knows what would have come of that anyway. But, we'll see. All right, I think we can just about wrap it up there. We almost got to the hour. It's going to be interesting to see what happens on Wednesday when Pitt plays against NC State. I think it's a 2 o'clock tip-off, the first game of the day in the ACC tournament in Greensboro. You can watch that one. Not sure if it's on ACC Network or where it is, but we can check that out. So definitely want to go to Panther-Lair.com during the game for our game thread on the message boards there, and also after the game for all the post-game reaction and talk with all your closest Pitt fan friends about the game. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It really is the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and you can, stay up to date on everything that's going on in Pitt sports. It's kind of like this podcast, this live stream. We have it all there on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. It's a conversation that's going on all day, every day. You want to talk about Pitt sports, you want to read about Pitt sports, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com is the place for you to do it. And what better to do? What better to have when you are checking out Panther-Lair.com than a New Belgium Voodoo Ranger Starship IPA? This is the good stuff. No, people don't drink holding the bottom of the can like I just did, but you do if you want to show off the can as you drink it. It's really good IPA. Tasty as always. New Belgium does it right. Voodoo Ranger is the way to go, and their Starship IPA is outstanding. So make sure you get some of that. I forget if I've had that, if I drank it before on the podcast or not. I think I might have. I probably will drink it again next week because we'll be back next Tuesday night, 8:30 for another live stream of the podcast. And you can check that out on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. It's like this website you see on the screen right here without the dash. Where's the dash? There it is. Without the dash, Panther-Lair.com. You can go and check it out on our YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel so you get notifications about when we're going live with this Tuesday night podcast. And also anytime we might decide to just go live and react to the news or anything that kind of comes up in the world of Pitt sports. So thanks again for tuning in on the live stream. We appreciate everybody who's watching and interacting and having a conversation here. It's lots of fun. Tell a friend because we like to have more people in the chat and offering questions and comments as we move through the hour of the podcast. Thanks again for checking out the live stream. Thanks again for listening to the podcast. Make sure you check out the website, and we will talk to you again. Oh, don't forget, Saturday mornings, 8 a.m., 93.7 The Fan, Panthers Insider Show. It's like this podcast, but it's a real live radio show. Come check it out. I can't forget to plug that. Check it out, 8 a.m. Saturday morning, Panthers Insider, 93.7 The Fan. Listen to that, give us a call and chat Pitt sports then. Check out the website between now and then next Tuesday night, come right back here, same bat time, same bat channel, to talk Pitt sports on the Panther-Lair Show. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great night. Enjoy the game on Wednesday. We will talk to you again soon.